Welcome to the Better Business Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Zelan. Join me week after week as I interview high-level entrepreneurs on their journey to success, both in business and personal development. Each week presents new stories to learn from and new ideas on how to run a better business. Stay updated with all the guests we'll have by subscribing to this podcast. Welcome to another episode of Better Business with Austin Zelan. Today I have special guest James Cottingham with us today, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of the businesses that he's got going on and how he got into entrepreneurship and how he's been able to scale it to where it's at today. So thank you so much for joining me today, James.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Could you share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got started and basically what got you to where you're at today?
Sure. So it's a family business originally, but what I've done in the last 10 years in particular is just grow it to the next level, which often people say that a family business, it's great the first generation gets ruined in the second generation. So I was determined to not do that. And the biggest thing that I've done is diversify our business in terms of focusing on where our strengths are and our weaknesses are, and making sure that we focus on the areas that make us the most revenue, if you like. So our family business, we are traditionally Ferrari specialists. So in the 70s, my parents founded the business called DK Engineering. David and Kate are my parents, their initials. Oh. And it started off as a restoration shop for 1950s and 60s Ferraris. Did a lot of business in the US in the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s. In the main, coming here to buy old racing Ferraris that had been raced for 10 years, the first 10 years of their life, put away, broken, and needing restoration 10, 20, 30 years later. So buying those projects, taking them back to the UK and restoring them to the highest standards. And with that came a very US-based client base as well, because people were sending cars to us in the 80s and 90s to restore. So Ralph Lauren, for example, we restored maybe 5 or 6 Jaguars and Ferraris for him in the late 80s and early 90s. At that time, I don't think the equivalent industry here in the US was as sophisticated and high quality as ours in the UK. Today, the restorations in the US are just as high quality as Europe, so there's no longer that equal demand. But that was the foundations of the business. When my brothers and I came into the business, we grew the sales side of the business, and my middle brother left the business in 2014, which is really when I started to keep pushing with the development of it. So from the major difference from that time to now is that we sell probably 200 cars a year as opposed to the 50 that we did at the time. Wow. Our total value of sales per year could be sort of $2 to $250 million. Wow. At that time, we were probably storing 15 cars for clients long term. Today, we have over 360 cars in our care, storage alone. Plus, we look after an entire collection that has 150 cars there or thereabouts in. Those buildings are owned by the clients, but they're local to us. The other buildings, where we have 360 or so, we own those buildings, and we've just added another building to that. So later on this year, we'll be starting on a project to add another 200 spaces for cars. Our workshop business has continued to be as busy as it always was, although we do seem to have more restorations on the go because we're taking on special projects now with the rest-of-mod industry and that sort of stuff. So we're covering every base, if you like. The only thing that we've scaled back on is actually race preparation. Funnily enough, we met here at Austin because I was racing in World Endurance Championship with McLaren. But in terms of race preparation, we don't do as much of that these days as we used to, as that is a very difficult business. I think if you're going to be a race team, that's all you can be. You can't do all the other things. Yeah. But what we do there is, because of my active participation in historic motorsport and modern motorsport, I feel that for our clients who are usually successful entrepreneurs who have made a lot of money, who want to spend their money and go racing and have fun, that we're able to offer them sound and sage advice and how to go about it and who to prepare the cars and assist them with their budgets. And whether it's a 1965 AC Cobra, who do we send that car to? What level does it need to be prepared to? What's sensible price-wise to run that car per race season? Or even now, you want to go and do World Endurance Championship race at Le Mans. I hope that I can soundly advise someone now to say, this is the program that you want to go with. These are the people you want to work with. So people like United Autosport to race with McLaren, right down to the driver managers as well, all that sort of stuff. So, the main focus in the last 10 years has been to really work with these growing values in the cars and understand the clients better. They are time poor. They want solid advice. They don't want to be overcharged for it, but they're happy to pay for the service, if you like. And that's been my principal thing, is to say, can we answer these questions we're being asked? Can we assist? Right through to insurance. We're not insurance brokers or providers. But when someone buys a car from us, depending on what it is, if they haven't got insurance in place, we'll say, this is where you need to go. These are the people you got to deal with. Mm-hmm. This is what you should be paying. These are the things to think about. These are the things to not pay for. And these are the things that you must pay for, as another example.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you mentioned a couple of very interesting things. First of all, I love that you're kind of like a hub for knowledge for all your clients. And whether you're able to provide that service or not, somebody who can. And you can give them that sound advice on what's reasonable, what's unreasonable. I think that's super, super cool and very, very valuable for people. Now, two other things that you mentioned. You started with Ferrari specifically. Is there a reason that you started with Ferrari as opposed to others?
Well, actually, when my parents started the business, they were very big Jaguar collectors. Okay. And my father had a collection of Jaguars. He raced them. He worked on them in his free time. He would buy and sell cars in his free time and do them up in the meantime, to then sell them for profit, and realized he could have more fun and make more money out of his hobby than he could his day job. He worked for Kodak originally as a research physicist. So smart guy, liked to challenge. It was when he set the business up in 1977 that he moved into Ferrari, because no one else was really doing it, because it was a complicated brand. They had especially in the 50s, they had 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder V12 engines, 2 different types of V12 engine. There was a lot of variation, lots of different models, whereas the Jaguar brand was pretty bland. It was always a straight 6. There was not that many models, whereas Ferrari was interesting. So that got him into it. And obviously it's a romantic, exciting brand as well. And I think he just saw the opportunity, or my parents saw the opportunity with Ferrari. And once they had a couple and did well with them, they realized this was the way to go. And you just soon end up on this path, and that becomes your speciality. Yeah. One thing you touched on there as well is like the hub of knowledge. One thing that we have always been as a family this is a hobby business in terms of we are active owners of these cars as well. So we have our own car collection of 25 to 30 cars. I know it's mad. I should remember exactly how many. It does fluctuate quite a lot, but we have, over 20 cars in the family collection. And like I'm racing this weekend, we restore our own cars for ourselves. We buy new cars. We use cars. We go to the events. We concours show cars at Pebble Beach, all that sort of stuff. So we really are active owners as well as the business providers. I think that's really important. So many businesses you see where people are just not interested in the product at all. Mm-hmm. That's a big difference to the guys that are really interested in the product and are passionate about it and have their head fully in the game, so to speak. That's very important. And I think that's an advantage we have over a lot of our competitors. A lot of the guys, you can clearly see they're not really car lovers. They love the deal more than the cars. Yeah. I think we love both equally. I love a deal, don't get me wrong. But I love the cars as well. And I still get, every now and again, you get that moment where you buy a car for stock and you're so excited to own that car. Or a particularly historic car comes in for us to look at, and you pinch yourself because you're like, this is super important. So a few years ago, we had a lady from over here in the US who's a good client of ours who has one of the best car collections in the world. And she and her late husband built this collection. And they owned the first Ferrari that won Le Mans and the Mille Miglia, did both of these things in 1949. Wow. And that car came to stay with us for 5 years. And it was like, this is pretty much the most significant Ferrari in existence, because 1947, they're a new brand. 1949, they win the 2 biggest races in the world with the same car. Yeah. And that's the car. That is the car that made Ferrari what it is in terms of its reputation. And there we were looking after this car for 5 years. Wow. In our care in the UK, because it was doing a tour of all the events in Europe. Yeah. And so that was a really special moment when that car came in. What an honor and privilege to have that car entrusted to us. Wow. But also to sort of sit in that seat and think, God, these guys, they really broke records, and that car put Ferrari on the map. And a great little anecdote about that car is that Luigi Canetti, who was one of the 2 guys that was responsible for Ferrari coming to America, which is pretty much their biggest market today. Luigi Canetti drove that car at Le Mans. And the English owner, Lord Selsdon, we don't really know what the truth is, but let's say he was unwell for the race. He only drove about half an hour of the race. Luigi Canetti drove for 23 hours and a half of the race on his own, aged 50
That's crazy.
in 1949. I mean, that is incredible. You know, I struggled to do 2 hours yesterday in the race. So to do 24 hours in, you know, with no proper headlights, no seat belts, no roof, no safety. Yeah, that's an incredible achievement. So yeah, cars like that come into our care, and it just still excites me. So that's really an important part of our business, is that, you know, also all the people that we employ want to make sure they're really into the industry. They don't just fall into it because it's an easy job.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, passion is super, super important. And especially when it comes to industries like this, where people have these really rare and special cars, you know, and they want somebody who's just as passionate as them in taking care of it. Now, when you mention like that car was in our care, what exactly does that mean to you?
So on that particular occasion, it meant that the car came to us to be stored.
Yep.
Safe place to keep it in Europe.
Okay.
And that we prepared it for these various events. So from servicing to cleaning to detailing to delivering it to the various events. I think that car, we took it to a Concours event in Monte Carlo, Villa d'Este in Italy, a couple of events in the UK, Salon Privé, and then Hampton Court Concours. So for all those events, there's the sort of preparing it for the event in terms of making sure it runs, that it's clean, it's detailed. Keeping an eye on it at the events, and when the lady that owned it came over to show the car, we'd just be there to support her. Taking it away from the events, taking it back, servicing it again. That was, you know, just being the guys that, the curators, if you like.
Yeah.
You know,
awesome.
big museum.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned another interesting thing is how you were able to grow the business side of it from 50 cars to 200 cars a year, which is pretty incredible. And I think part of that is your passion for this industry and the business and all that stuff. Now, what were some challenges maybe that you experienced while growing the company like that?
Challenge in the UK space. That's a big thing for us. Real estate is difficult. It's expensive. We're based just outside London. We have good space, but to build new buildings is hard. And then to find buildings where we can keep all these cars close to our base is difficult. So that's always been a big struggle of mine, is that whatever space we have, we fill it. I'm always looking to the next project. So as I mentioned, I've just bought this building, which I've had to overpay for, but they knew that I was the buyer for the building, I guess. But that will give us a capacity for another. We have 70 cars in there at the moment, but when we've renovated it, we'll have 4 floors in that building, and therefore 250 or so cars. That's always been a struggle. The ability to write a check, you know, so the art of good sales in our business is, a lot of it is driven by the ability to actually be able to buy the car and own it outright and have control of it. And, you know, often when you have cars on consignment, even if you've got a contract in place, it gets quite complicated. Owners can change their mind. You know, you're always the guy that's taking the pain when offers are made. You know, the guy says, this is what I want. The asking price is here. Someone offers here. And the difference is your commission, and you're being squeezed. Whereas when you own the cars, it's a lot easier. So I think having the funding behind you to buy these cars is important. But we've had such a good run with the industry, and the values have grown so much that it's become harder and harder to own the cars. You know, so we've had to make sure that we keep the money in the business and reinvest in our stock and be smart with it. Because sometimes you can buy cars that are on a bit of a run, and then the market changes direction. Suddenly you're left holding the baby, and you're thinking, shit, what am I going to do with this car?
Yeah.
So you have to find a way to sensibly exit that car, and you're always looking for a profit, but sometimes you just got to cut loose and sometimes take a loss. Yeah. So that's, you know, that is a big challenge. Is like, you know, the mental strain of owning all of these stock items, and we may have $50 million at any one point in time tied up in stock, and some of that money is our own, some of it's finance money from the bank, some of it's joint venture money with clients. It's just balancing that ability to be able to buy the cars.
Yeah. So do you use a lot of banks and financial institutions to help you run it?
We've got a good relationship with our bank, whereby we have a facility that's, you know, we have a large stock portfolio that's existing. We leverage an amount of that to give us some more cash to buy more stock. We could leverage a lot more, but it's about keeping that balance, reading the market. And, you know, quite often people come to us and they have money that they'd like to invest and do some projects with us. You know, that's a great way for people to experience our side of the business in terms of the buying and selling. Have a little bit of ownership experience as well for a short period of time, and then we sell the car for a profit and we split the profit in some way, shape, or form. That's really fun and exciting. It's quite safe as well for people, because in those scenarios, you can let them buy the item of stock. They know we're making no money on the way in, so why would we put their money into it unless we think we're going to make money on the way out? And they've got the security of owning that asset, so they know their money's safe. I think a lot of people invest in things whereby money can just disappear quite quickly. Whereas you're doing a JV where they're owning an asset. That's quite lucrative. Obviously we have exclusivity over it for a period of time, which is really important. And it's just taking an opportunity, or taking advantage of all these opportunities that are presented to you, not only with the cars and when they come along and trying to buy them, but with people that want to get involved and work with you. I think collaboration is very important. Not only on a point of view with people that want to do joint venture deals with us, but also other traders like myself in the market. The more we work together, the more business we do. If you try and be like a loan agent that only deals with the end user and doesn't share commissions when they may have an idea and introduce you to someone, you don't go very far when you do that. You've got to work with the rest of the trade. And our industry is quite small in terms of, there aren't that many dealers out there, and everyone knows each other, and your paths cross so much. You've got to stay friends. You've got to play clean. You've got to be honorable. You've got to be, someone of your word. So if you say you're going to buy something, you've got to follow through with it. If you say that you're going to pay someone a commission, you've got to pay them the commission. And what goes around comes around. People remember these things.
Definitely. So you'd say that networking and building these business relationships has been instrumental in growing your business?
For sure. Probably the best thing that we've done, though, is making sure that our brand is understood and that we have a strong and reliable brand. So our cars are always, our restorations have always been the highest quality. The cars that we buy and sell, we make sure that they are the highest quality cars, and that we can honestly provide that complete service without disguising it. So if we subcontract, we tell people that, but it's only as a result of our experience that we know how to go about that. We are restoration experts. So even if we don't do the restoration in-house, and that's the same for sort of race preparation of historic cars, if we don't do it in-house and we're sending it to someone else, we understand what's going on. We understand the engineering behind it. And that's really important. And I think my motto for the business in recent years has become the complete service. And I really mean it. We know what we're doing in all these different areas. I do see competitors trying to sort of bridge the gap, and a restoration in particular, they actually don't know what they're doing. They're just entrusting it to someone that does know what they're doing, and they go and have a look a few times a year. We're still heavily involved in these restorations.
Definitely. That expert oversight, I think, is very, very important. Now, as far as growing your business, have there been any strategies that you could share that significantly boosted the business's growth?
I think one of the best things that ever happened to me was the bank saying you need to have a director of finance. Having that person that just is looking at the numbers all the time. And at the beginning, I didn't really see the need for it. I'm 6 or 7 years into having a director of finance now. Probably one of the best things we ever did.
Wow, interesting.
Just someone that makes sure that you regularly review things. I think it's, in internal audit or internal review of performance is probably one of the first things that you push to one side because you're busy. And if you are growing fast, you don't have enough hours in the day. So if you've got someone that's job is to make sure that they're reviewing the numbers on, a weekly basis, a monthly basis for management accounts, even for performance review of staff, in terms of your stock, how many days it's been in stock, how what your margins were as a percentage, all that sort of stuff. Suddenly it changes your business really quickly, and when you can foresee when it's going wrong much faster than you could do without that. In England, we have a saying, we did the sums on the back of a fag packet, which is kind of like a serviette agreement in a restaurant that you might do with someone. For years, my father and I did that too much, and the moment we went down the route of being able to analyze our numbers on a monthly basis, it just creates so much more efficiency. As I said, you can see when it's going wrong. It gives you targets as well, like naturally, especially with the racing that's in our blood. We're competitive people. So if we see that we're down one month, you work harder the next month. often feels like I can't work harder because we work all hours of the day, and this is a lifestyle industry.
Yeah.
But it is super useful, and I think having that person in place, and it's an expense that you feel like you can't afford, but having that person in place is really important. It's got to be someone you can rely on and that you trust. Trust their viewpoints on it. And it becomes a bit of a bouncing board as well. Can we afford to do this? What's our cash flow position? What do you think about buying this building? They can go and run the numbers and say, well, as long as we fill it with this many cars and we get there within 6 months, then it'll start washing its face. Okay, we know it's a good decision. Yeah, the building's expensive, but let's go for it.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Now, as far as company culture goes, how important would you say that is to your day-to-day operations and even like retaining talent?
Yeah, company culture is an interesting one because I think the world is changing so much for the worse in terms of workplace attitudes. I was prepared, especially during the pandemic, I was prepared to give working from home a little go. It's not a thing. It's not efficient. Can't see how it works, especially for our industry. In a sales point of view, obviously our guys can't restore cars from home. They have to come to the office. But I think, workplace culture is really interesting at the moment. It's changing a lot, but I think there are a lot of things that are quite temporary. And the working from home thing, obviously we deal with a lot of business owners, and I'd say the majority of our business owners that have tried it have found that it's a real negative, and the trust sort of issues that result as a result of it is the biggest hurdle. But on the flip side, one of the most important things as a leader is it's got to be do as I say and I do, because when you're asking people to do things in a certain way and you're not doing it yourself, it just sends out such a bad vibe. And I see it so often with people in different businesses like ours that are sort of middle tier management, that they talk a good game, but they don't play a good game, and it doesn't work long term. You've got to be, especially if you're a business leader, you've got to be first in, last out. If you say that this is the process we have to adhere to and this is what we expect you to do, you have to adhere to that process. And even if you don't have time to do it yourself, then you've got to employ someone to work alongside you that makes sure you do it in that way. Whether it's listing systems, whether it's CRM tools, it's all of this stuff only works if it's used properly. And that's why you want your guys to use it. And therefore, if you don't do it yourself, well, it's never going to be a good thing. So you've got to set a good example throughout your working day to your team, and you've got to do it exactly as they do. And if you're being paid the most, well, you've got to perform the best. That's really important. Of course, you've got to also, you can't have an atmosphere that's oppressive. You can't have an atmosphere that's really overbearing. It's got to be a fun place to work, but it's got to be serious at the same time too. And luckily for me, as a second generation business, I've got quite a younger workforce. I haven't actually ever worked it out, but I think that our average age in the business is about 40, which is relatively young considering the value of assets we're dealing with and the level of expertise we have. We have so much behind us. We have such a strong foundation, thanks to my parents who built the business in terms of our data and our knowledge. We're really lucky that we can lean on that and that we can access that, and our guys can learn on the job really quickly. So it's an interesting topic, but it's I think it's changing so fast and will come full circle.
Yeah. And as you're running the business, how do you approach decision making? So maybe you're uncertain about something, or you see the economy's changing, or there's just certain things that are happening that maybe we didn't even expect or anticipate. How do you approach decision making in those times?
It all comes down to a bit of a formula, really, between using the data that's at your hands, gut feeling, experience, making sure that your team understand what you're feeling. I think you've got to be open about it. If you think the market's turning, if you think the market's difficult, you tell your team. If you think that we've done really well in a bad market, you tell your team. If you think that we should have done better in a great market than we have done, you tell your team and you say, where can we learn from this? And data is king in everything. And as we've seen with AI, that is all about data. and it's, it's amazing how much the world is changing now because of the way AI can use data. So every little thing that you learn or that you experience, you've got to make notes on it. You've got to have a way to re-access that data. And in our industry, it's really simple. Someone says they want something. You tell your guy, make sure you write that down, and you tell the rest of the team, because A, you're not going to remember that in 4 weeks' time. And B, when someone else is offered that car that guy wanted, they should be able to look at our data and say, hey, if it's me, James, you said that Tom wants such and such. You said it 4 months ago, 4 weeks ago, whenever it may be. I've just been offered this. Suddenly you can put more deals together. And lots of people think that they can remember everything. You can't. You cannot remember everything. You've got to be organized. You've got to note everything down. You've got to be open about it. And that's, CRM for us is the most important thing that we have, so that we can work out who is interested in what.
Definitely. So you're basically using data to drive these decisions, or using as much data as you have, even if there's uncertainty.
For sure. And when it comes down to inquiries, if you get a particular car and you put it online and you have, sometimes this happens, we have 50 inquiries a week versus the average of like 10 inquiries a week.
Yeah.
You think, well, we should be buying another one of those. But if it takes too long to sell, then you say, well, we had lots of inquiries, but it didn't sell quickly, then it must have been overpriced. So yeah, you use that data to make decisions as you go forwards. We should definitely look at buying more of those, but it was too expensive.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when it comes to industry trends and shifting markets, how do you keep up with what's going on in the industry, and maybe even in terms of like restoration, like the newest technologies, or just staying ahead of the curve when it comes to those things?
Particularly in sales, in terms of the market trends. Again, as I said before, the data is so important. We monitor, what we're getting lots of inquiries on, how long we've had certain items in stock for, how successful you've been. So you start to get on a run. So, for example, 4 or 5 years ago, we started to have a really good run with Porsche Carrera GTs. So we just started stocking more of them up our sleeve. So we'd have one advertised at a time, we'd have one ready to go. And so you can get really good momentum. And then suddenly one day the inquiries stop. And you've just got to accept that suddenly the market will be served. Everyone that was looking for a car has been served, and you end up with the last one. And on that one, you may need to take your money back, or maybe take a small loss. And in the meantime, you would have seen another trend developing. We can look at the market and say, hang on a sec, that's done really well, that's done really well. I think these are overlooked. Let's push that market. We're in a strong position where we can help people join us on a journey of making people appreciate this particular model more and more. That happened to us a few years ago on something very niche, but a Mercedes CLK GTR. I was watching Porsche, which is a 1990s race car based homologation special, 25 units built, 26 units built. And I was looking at McLaren F1s and Porsche GT1s, which are very similar, and their values, and thinking, well, the Mercedes is quite undervalued. So I just went and bought one, which it was a $5 million purchase at the time, or 5.75 or something like that.
Wow.
But I went and bought one, made some YouTube videos about it, showcased it a bit, and suddenly everyone was like, oh, hang on a sec. McLaren F1 and the Porsche GT1 and DK have bought one. Well, we should buy one. And as a result, I managed to trade 2 or 3 cars. It's not lots and lots, but these cars are high value, so the margins are good on them, because I've taken a lot of risk to invest my money in those.
Yeah.
It worked quite well. We sort of built that market for them and raised their notoriety. And so sometimes we'll spot a gap in the market. And I have heard it before, where people have said they've heard that DK are buying Maserati MC12s, for example. Again, there's only 50 of those. And suddenly people go and buy a Maserati MC12 or they come to us and they want to buy one because they've heard we're buying one. So we can spot trends because of our sales data. We can also spot opportunities because we see similar items that are doing really well, and we feel like that's been overlooked. That's an interesting game. Quite risky though, but exciting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a powerful position that you're in. You're basically kind of making the market because you have so much influence and you're a thought leader in the space.
Yeah, and because we're enthusiasts, I don't like cars that I don't like. I will only go for the things that I like and that I really understand. And I think they're a truly great thing.
Yeah.
I've seen over the years where there have been runs on certain things and suddenly other cars become very popular. And I think that's not something I'd like to own, and I don't believe in it. And sure enough, after time, it's a bit of a bubble and it deflates, and suddenly a load of people end up with a car they paid 20% too much for because they thought it was a good run. And it's because they didn't look at the simple formula items that you have to consider, like how many did they build, what's their value, position been over the last 20 or 30 years if they're that old, are they expensive to maintain, et cetera, et cetera. And you can soon make these decisions based on that knowledge of how the market works.
Yeah.
What makes these cars undervalued or overvalued, and understanding that.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you have something very special with the products and services that you offer to your clients. So how do you make sure that these products and services are consistently exceeding client expectations?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Funny enough, at breakfast this morning, we were talking about a similar business to ours with someone, and I explained how one of my personal cars I sent there for a service, and when I received it back, I'd had a great service, but when I received it back, all the parts that had been removed that were scrap were just left in the front boot.
Oh, wow. And
I was blown away by it because, I'm paying for this top quality service. I should receive my car back in an immaculate state. And it was like that. And instead of complaining to that business, I took a photograph and I sent it out to everyone in the business. And I just said, this is why we're DK and these guys are who they are, because that's not how you do things. This is not acceptable. This is my baby. It's my pride and joy. And it's been delivered back to me like this.
Wow.
And I think it's just, again, it comes back to us being owners of cars as well as having a business surrounding them, that we understand our product. And no matter what you're doing, it doesn't have to be cars, but you've got to understand your product. You've got to have an investment in your product. You have to be passionate about it. And yeah, like I said, a solid understanding, because we have that. We know what our expectations would be if we were in the client's shoes. And that's really important for every member of staff. They have to think like a client. If I walk into the workshop and I see a car with handprints on, I say to the guys, what's going on here? Why has this car got handprints on it? If it was yours and it was in your garage at home, would you be okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is always no.
Yeah.
It's the same with if there's oil on the floor in the workshop and I walk through and I see it, I say, guys, what's going on here? If your kitchen had oil on the floor, would you leave it like that? No. Well, this workshop is our kitchen. Like, this is supposed to be clinical. Why is there oil on the floor? Why has in the last 2 hours 5 people walked past it?
Yeah. Interesting.
It's having that high level and being consistent about it, not letting standards slip. I go on about data and listing and things like that. You can have too many lists and check sheets and things like that, but you've got to be methodical. And I always, to my new members of staff, they always feel that our processes are process heavy, but the processes win eventually. We have a very thorough check-in service, for example. So if someone gives us a car to sell and it arrives with us, the moment it arrives, we document all the damage around the car, the total contents, everything that's missing, everything that we want to highlight, and we share it with the client and we say, this is how we've received it. And I always say to people, at some point in time, this will win. And what I mean by that is at some point in time, you won't do it. Someone gets the car back because we haven't sold it after a time, and they say, there's a chip on the front that wasn't there before. You'll know it was there, but because you didn't log it and share it with them at the start, you've got no way to prove it. And then they're always like, yeah, it would have won. The process would have won. I should stick to the process. And if you do, you'll be okay.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple very interesting things there. So firstly, you're basically making sure that everybody in your organization has the client experience in mind. And that has to do with like the handprint on the car and like the oil on the ground.
It's the mentality.
Yeah.
You've got to put yourself in the owner's shoes.
Exactly.
And easier for us as well, because our industry, you have to remember all these cars, no one needs to own them. Everyone that owns them has worked hard and is treating themselves to a toy. It's their baby.
Mm-hmm.
They expect perfection.
Yeah.
And especially the average value of the things we sell, you really should justifiably expect perfection.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that I bet you that plays a huge role in how employees are able to take care of these cars, because they understand how that client may feel. And secondly, you mentioned processes, and I've had some experience in the corporate world, and they're very process heavy. And sometimes, as an entrepreneur, you might be like, "Oh, well, that's a little excessive, and it's a little bit tedious, and there's this and there's that." But it's true. There's a very, very big benefit to having systems and processes in place, because at the end of the day, your business is just a system or a process. And that's what makes the whole thing run. And that in the end, it wins. The processes win.
And you learn from your mistakes. So
Exactly.
when there's a problem and you have to think back, well, how will we avoid this next time? It usually comes down to having a process in place.
Yeah.
I think processes also, when you have staff turnover, if you have processes in place, it's really easy to train staff.
Yep.
Well, it's not really easy. It's much easier to train
Much
staff
easier, yeah.
because you have these processes. So you have a Bible as such, like this is how we deal with this process, or this situation is this process, this process, this process. Yeah. And it's been really interesting to develop those over the last 10 years to the point where now we're at a point where we're tweaking all the time. We're not really changing anything anymore. It's all the same.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a massive part of our business.
Yeah.
I think also understanding not everyone can do everything. So if someone in the team is weak at a particular process, don't expect them to do it. Give them something else they're stronger at. But then if they selectively choose to not do something that they are perfectly capable of doing, also being able to spot that and pull them up on it and say, this is your job, you're here to work, and you're expected to do this, and it's not okay for you to just randomly select a task that you don't want to do because it doesn't really interest you. You know, there are things I don't like doing, but I still do them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's what also causes clients to trust you, because they know that the experience is going to be consistent every single time, and it gives you a bit of an extra kind of leverage with your team. If they're not doing something wrong, they don't see you as the bad guy that's like, oh, why don't you do this thing? It's like, well, no, that's the process, and you agreed to follow the process. Why aren't you following it? So I think that simplifies some of those things. Now, also when it comes to implementing new technology, or maybe simplifying some of these processes with automation or AI even, are there opportunities in your business to implement technology, and how are you doing that?
So there are. The journey I'm on at the moment is I'm still perfecting the processes. I do believe that within the next 3 years or so that I will embark upon a new software package that I'll have designed for myself that incorporates all of them into one. It is a bit silly that at the moment, you know, our storage business has a particular software package. Our sales business, you know, does things very manually. Our service business has a package, but we communicate across all of those businesses with another tool. I'd love to bring that into one at one point in time, but I feel like whilst we're tweaking, it's important to tweak and get it right and then pull it into one. But yeah, I think the opportunities that are out there now mean that we'll be able to really efficiently pull everything together and become even more efficient.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't pull the trigger 5 years ago when I thought about it initially. And I'm happy with where we are right now. And yeah, there's a lot of cross communication, but that's life. You know, I think we're doing a hell of a lot more than a lot of other businesses do.
Yeah, definitely. And have you been able to achieve work-life balance?
Well, I've struggled this year.
Yeah.
But you know, this year I'm building a house with my wife. I've got 2 kids, 3 and 2 years old.
Yeah.
Doing World Endurance Championships. I'm doing 8 rounds all around the world. So here we are in Austin. 2 weeks' time I'll be in Fuji. Got a business to run. Yeah, it's been difficult.
Yeah.
But all of that comes down to being open with your team, I think, and saying, this is what I'm doing this year. So understand that at certain times it's going to be difficult. Make sure that when I'm around that we can cover the things that you've got problems with. And even today, you know, I'm back tomorrow. I land at 11 o'clock. I've really only got 2.5 days in the office before I go to a big event in the UK. So my PA, I've seen that she's made sure that everyone books in time with me and that we know what we're doing and anything that's important is dealt with.
Yeah.
And that gives you the opportunity then to single out the days and the weekends and the weeks where you can go and do stuff with the family, or if you're focusing on this project or that project, and just realizing that you can't do it all.
Yeah.
But if you do little bits and pieces, and I did mechanical engineering at university, which I've always said to people, the most useful thing about it is that you had so much to do. So I had the equivalent of, you know, what we have in England, A-levels, which is as you finish school when you go to university, usually a university course is like 2 or 3 A-levels. Felt like mechanical engineering was 10 A-levels. It was so much work, but it helped me prioritize. So if I was thrown now in the workplace, if I'm thrown lots of different things that I need to deal with and juggle, I know which one I have to focus on the most. I know which ones I need to do a little bit on at a time and which ones I can push to one side, but obviously make sure I get back to them at some point. I see a lot of other people in my business and even my family who don't have that skill set, who will be thrown a problem and it's all they can think about. They can't do anything else. that's a skill that I think, if there's a way to teach that to people, is really important. That you naturally, the traditional listing of jobs to do is such an important thing to do.
Yeah.
I talked about being able to remember a car that someone said they wanted 4 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a job that someone's asked you to do and you think, I can't do that now, but I'm going to do it next week, you've got to write it down.
Yeah.
Okay, today it's digitally, but you've got to do it. You've got to have listing in place. You've got to have prioritization. And sometimes you've got to be honest with people when they ask you to do something. You've got to turn around and say, honestly, we can't do that for 2 weeks, but we'll get back to it.
Yeah.
And actually, with my team, one of the other things that I think I often say that's really valuable and important is no news is good news. So, for example, we've got a car in the workshop. It's got a broken front lift, and that part is not available. Whilst you're waiting for it, you need to go back to the client every week and say, just to let you know, we've chased the supplier, we're waiting for it. If the supplier comes back and says it's going to be another 2 weeks, tell the client. So often, I've had guys say to me, oh, we don't have any news. I say, well, tell the client that, because that's news.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the fact that you don't have news is news.
Yeah.
That communication to a client makes them feel like, or makes them know that you're thinking about them and that their car is on your list.
Yeah.
It's not being ignored.
Yeah,
no one likes to be ignored.
Yeah.
And none of these tasks like to be ignored. So even if it's a little bit, and you update people and whoever it may be, and whatever the task may be, it's so important just to do a little bit on everything when you can. And if you can't touch it for a few weeks, tell someone. And when that time period is up, have some mechanism in place that you go back to it and do that little bit, or tell them, I'm really sorry, it's going to be another week.
Yeah.
Don't just ignore people.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's really, really good. Okay, cool. Now, as we wrap up here, our audience may see your business and they want to learn how they can also increase their business's value and grow their business, and at the end of the day, just run a better business. Is there any last word of advice that you'd want to leave them with?
I think I touched on it earlier on. It's, you've got to have a strong team around you. No one creates a successful business on their own.
Yep.
And leading by example is the most important thing. And I'm lucky that my parents led by example. They always worked hard. They were always first in, last out. They always acted in a way that's what they expected. The team, the staff. The way in which they acted, they expected them to, and they led by example. And that's been really important for me, is leading by example.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, And then when people see how hard you work, and as a result, the results that are in place, they don't begrudge you enjoying yourself, because they know they're not doing that. And people really understand that better than ever today. I think a lot of people want to get rich fast, and it's not easy. It's not as easy as that. I think Instagram makes everyone think when you watch Reels that it is really easy. It's not. It's hard work, and life is hard. Okay, there are opportunities out there these days that can accelerate things, but they're few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
It is about hard work. So leading by example is my single most important part of running our business is to do it. And the fact that I'm racing a lot, I will feel bad if I come away from a race weekend without some sort of lead that is beneficial to the business.
Yeah.
It's costing us money for me to be here, but I want to come away from each weekend with a lead. And coming here to Austin, I've seen some great people, and I've met some great people, and I've definitely come away with leads.
Yeah.
And I make sure I feed that back to the team as well. Communication, the data, all of this accumulation is important. But leading by example is very important.
Awesome. Well, James, thank you so much for joining me here. This was very, very informative. And I know people can learn a lot from how you run your business and how you grow it. If somebody wants to connect with you, what's the best way to find you?
You can go to our website, www.dke.co.uk. You can find us on Instagram. You just search DK Engineering. We've got 250,000 followers, and we do lots of videos and things like that. We didn't touch on social media at all, but that's been a big part of the drive of our business, our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
My niche has been doing users guides. So the CLK GTR that I discussed, I did a users guide that just took people right through the car as if you're the owner of the car, and the fact that it has a CD changer and how the hydraulic jack lifting system works, all that stuff. People love that. Very technical. So you can check us out on YouTube for that. You can check us out on Instagram. You can go to our website. Yep. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can just drop an email via the website, and that'll get forwarded to me, and I can get in touch.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. This has been a very interesting episode with James, and he shared a lot about how he's grown his business to the level that it's at today. And what it really comes down to is being present and setting that correct example for your organization to be successful. So thank you guys for joining us today, and I'll see you all in the next episode.